Welcome back to Discover the Wonders. Today we're going to talk about people in the Bible who got good news about a baby. And we're going to talk about a time when I got bad news about a baby, but how God turned bad news into good news. And we'll also talk about a girl who got good news about a baby who is good news. So first we start with the Bible story, and we're still talking about Abraham and Sarah. So God had promised Abraham and Sarah that they would have their own child, but they were already too old. God had promised Abraham that just like there were so many stars in the sky, you can't count them, that's how many descendants, great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren that they would have. So that was a pretty amazing promise. But as they were already too old to have children, that seemed kind of impossible. But Abraham did believe God because he knew God is faithful. God keeps his word and God is able to do anything. But then, as we heard last week, they got tired of waiting and they tried to have a baby another way through Abraham marrying Sarah's maid. But that didn't go so well, and that turned out to be more of a problem, and it wasn't the way God had intended. But anyway, one day Abraham and Sarah were just resting in the middle of the day. They're out in the desert. It's very hot, and it's the time of the day when it is the hottest, so they are resting and they're in their tents. But Abraham is sitting at the door of his tent and he sees somebody coming. He actually sees 3 people coming, and they're men that he hasn't seen before. They're not friends, they're not somebody that he knows, but he jumps up and he runs to go meet them even though they are strangers. And he says to them, "Oh, you guys must be so hot and thirsty and tired. Come and sit down here under the tree and I will make you a meal." And so those men, they appreciated Abraham's hospitality and they came and they sat down. So now Abraham wants to prepare a meal for them. But how was he going to do that? They're out in the desert. And in those days, they didn't have fridges and freezers or microwaves. And there's no supermarkets close by. They're out in the desert. So they've got to do it from scratch. So he goes to Sarah and says, "Sarah, could you please make some bread?" So first she's got to make the dough and knead it, and it's going to take a bit of time. Making bread takes time. And then he needs some meat, so that means he's got to go kill a calf. He's got to kill an animal. Can't just grab some out of the fridge. So he got a servant to do that, to prepare some meat, and he got to milk the cow to get some milk and cream. But anyway, he kept going until he had a nice meal for these people. So as they were sitting eating their food, one of them said, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And Abraham said, "She's in the tent." She was resting in the tent. And this man said, "In 9 months, Sarah is going to have a baby." And Sarah was sitting in the tent and she kind of laughed to herself. She thought, "Yeah, right, I'm way too old to have a baby." Sarah was around 90. I mean, who do you know who has a baby when they're 90? That's impossible. But with God, all things are possible. But she'd been waiting so long because God had promised they'd have a child that, now she just laughed and thought, "Yeah, you're right, I'm way too old." But she didn't laugh out loud. But one of those men who was with Abraham said, "Why did Sarah laugh?" And Sarah thought, "Oh no, how does he know that I laughed?" And she said, "I didn't laugh." And he said, "Yes, you did. Is there anything too hard for God? You will definitely have a son in 9 months." So now they've been given a promise that in 9 months, she is definitely going to have a child, because there is nothing too hard for God. And they've been waiting so long. Finally, it's just about time for them to have a baby. So that was good news that they got, good news that they needed to believe, because God is faithful and God doesn't tell lies. He doesn't make promises he can't keep. So now I'm going to tell you about a time that I got news about a baby. So I was pregnant with our 4th child. We had 3 other children. The oldest one was maybe about 4, and the youngest one was a year and a bit. And anyway, so I was pregnant with my 4th one, and I went to have the 20-week scan. But the lady who was doing the scan, she couldn't get a proper view of the baby's heart, and that is an important part of the body. So she said, you need to come back in a few weeks again, and I really need to see the heart. And I didn't really want to come back again. It's a little bit annoying when you've got 4 little children and you're going to get a babysitter. But she said, you really need to come back again, and we need to check out that heart because your heart is important. And so when I came back the next time, she actually had a hard time seeing the heart, getting a good picture because the baby was wriggling around so much. But finally, she got a good picture of the heart, and it was bad news. Our baby had a hole in her heart. And so the lady said, you're going to have to go down to Wellington, and you're going to have a scan down there, and they'll tell you, what's the next step is from here. And so that was a little bit hard. But do you know what? We all have a hole in our heart. We are all born with a hole in our heart. Now, not physically, like you may be born with a perfectly healthy heart, but we are all born with emptiness inside of us. We have, our heart is not just our physical. Well, we have a physical heart, but our heart can just mean inside of us. Our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions and all those things, we have a hole. We have a hole that only God can fill because we were created to love God. But we are born, because of the sin in the Garden of Eden, we are born not loving God. We love ourselves, and that means that we have a hole that only God can fill. We want to have joy and we want to have peace. And so to get these things, to be happy, we try to fill that hole with other things. Things like friendships, or things like the things we collect, or our toys, or experiences, or lots of other things. But God is the only one who can fill that hole, who can give us the joy and the peace to fill that emptiness that we have inside of us. So in a way, we all have a hole in our heart. And I'm going to sing you a song about how Jesus satisfies us. And I wrote this song, and it's called The One Who Satisfies. I would rather be poor and be close to the Lord than to have all the riches in the world. For knowing Christ is of greater worth than all the treasures of this earth. For he is the one who satisfies and meets the longings of my heart inside. I have tasted and seen that the Lord is good. All I want is to be closer to him. I would rather sail a storm-tossed sea with the one who cares for me than to always have a sunny sky and be unprepared to die. I would rather be sick in the hospital with God's peace in my soul than to always be in perfect health. He is better than life itself. For he is the one who satisfies and meets the longing of my heart inside. I have tasted and seen that the Lord is good. All I want is to be closer to him. I would rather have a broken heart and experience God's comfort than to never have to feel some pain, knowing God is such great gain. For he is the one who satisfies and meets the longing of my heart I have tasted and seen that the Lord is good. All I want is to be closer to Him. All I want is to be closer to Him. So God is the only one who can truly satisfy us and to fill that hole in our heart. So when our daughter Lydia was born, we found out that she didn't only have a hole in her heart. Well, she also had another problem, which we found out when we had our scan down in Wellington. We found out that her pulmonary artery, like her big main artery around her heart, was too small. So that was a problem as well. So she had 2 heart problems. When she was born, we also found out that she had Down syndrome. And that was a little bit of a, kind of surprise or a shock. We did know that she might because of the heart problems, but we didn't want to find out until she was born. But that was a bit of a hard thing. When you have a baby, you don't expect, all the different disabilities or health problems. But you know what? I learned that everybody is special, no matter what disability you have. My little girl was just as precious as anybody else, and she's a very special little girl. But, disabilities can be special abilities too. So she can't do everything that other children her age do. But she can do things that I can't do. She's a very friendly girl. She treats everybody the same with kindness and love. And that's something that doesn't come naturally to me. I'm a very shy person. So, everybody has abilities, even when they have disabilities. So no matter how you were created, no matter what problems or health problems or disabilities you might have, or just things you wish you were better at, you are special and you are created perfect just the way that you are. So I'm going to sing a little song called I'm Special to Jesus. And once I made a YouTube video with this song, and I put little pictures or little photos of my daughter Lydia when she was a baby in the hospital. So that is on YouTube, called I'm Special to Jesus. I'm going to sing that now. I'm special to Jesus. There's no one else like me. I wouldn't swap places with anyone else. I'm special, you see. God has prepared a job He wants me to do. I'm special to my Lord. I'm special to my Lord. So our little girl Lydia was born down at the Wellington Hospital. We had to have her down there just because there's more doctors down there that could, knew what to do with the heart problems. And she was very kind of sickly and frail, and she was quite small as well, although she was quite big compared to a lot of the premature babies in the NICU. So she had to go into the intensive care unit for babies called the NICU. And she was there for about 8 weeks. And she was not well enough to go home. So she had to stay there, but they didn't want to have her heart surgery until she was older, because if they waited till she was bigger, then there was more of a chance that it would go well and that they would fix everything. So we had a lot of waiting time in the hospital, and we stayed at Ronald McDonald over the road, which is an amazing place to stay at. It is such a good place to be able to stay when you have, a child in the hospital. And our children were able to come because they would go to my parents in Taranaki, which was a long way away. And they were all still really little. Our youngest one was our youngest one, apart from Lydia, was only 1.5 years old at the time. So that was hard, but he was able to stay with my parents. And then one of my sisters would come and bring them to Ronald McDonald and would stay with us for about 2 weeks so we could still spend time with them and look after Lydia at the same time. When Lydia was about 8 weeks old, her oxygen levels kept getting worse and worse, so we had to take her up to Starship. So we had to go on an ambulance to the airport, and then we had to go on the Life Flight plane, and we went up to the Starship Hospital, which was a whole lot bigger than the Wellington Hospital, and it took a while to learn not to get lost in all those hallways and different, the different levels, the different stories. So she went into the heart ward, and she had a procedure done on her heart. And around this time, we had our wedding anniversary while we were up there. Now, usually in the heart ward, then we'd have to be there to look after Lydia because she was in her own little room. But one of the nurses promised to look after her so that we could go out for a dinner and celebrate our wedding anniversary, which was really kind of the nurse. So we went downtown and we went to a Chinese restaurant for dinner. It was a very special restaurant and we had a nice time. And then we went to Burger King for pudding. And then we went for a walk through the domain afterwards. So we'd been in Wellington for a really long time in the hospital and at Ronald McDonald, and there's just not much nature there. You know, you're right in the middle of the city. And so now we were at the domain, and just to be able to see grass was such a nice thing, which it kind of sounds weird, but that when you're in hospital a lot, little things like that can be really special. And I remember just taking off my shoes and walking barefoot on the grass, and it just felt so nice after being right in the middle of the city for so long. So that was a fun evening, but when we came back, we walked back into the hospital, and at that point, we didn't know how long we were going to be there for. So we'd already been in hospital for 2 months, and we knew that it might still be another month or two before we could go home because we thought that we might have to stay there until her heart surgery. So it was all very uncertain, and as I walked back to our little room in the heart ward, I just suddenly felt really depressed and really hopeless and just kind of really sad. And I thought, I can't handle this anymore because I didn't know how much longer it was going to go on for. And I'd had enough of being in hospital. I was missing my other children. And because we'd just come up to Starship, we didn't know when we were going to see them again. And so I was especially missing our little boy who, he was still so little. And I thought, I cannot handle this anymore. I just want to go home. We've been in hospital long enough. And a Bible verse, which is also the title of a song, came into my mind, and and that verse says, He giveth more grace. And the word grace can mean the kindness that God shows to us as sinners, but it can also mean the help and the strength that God gives us to go through the problems in life. So that verse came into my mind, He giveth more grace. And that brought me such joy to know that no matter how long we're in hospital for, no matter how hard it was, God always has more help for us. He will always help us more and more. His help never runs out. And so I went from feeling so depressed and to finding it so hard to feeling so full of joy. Now, I'm just going to sing you this song called He Giveth More Grace, and it was written by somebody whose parents died when she was only 6 years old. And first she was given to a friend, so the friend could take care of them, but she didn't take very good care of them. So later on, her and her sister were adopted by a couple who treated them a whole lot better and took care of them. And when Annie was older, she became a teacher, but she had really horrible arthritis and she lived with a lot of pain. And so her problem was physical pain. But she wrote the song, He Giveth More Grace. And you may have problems too. And if you don't now, you will one day. But remember that God gives more grace and more help. And no matter how hard your life gets, God always has more help. He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, He addeth His mercy. To multiplied trials, His multiplied peace. His love has no limits. His grace has no measure. His power has no boundary, nor none to man. For out of His infinite riches in Jesus He giveth and giveth and giveth again. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, not that your need shall exceed his provision. Our God ever yearns his resources to share. Lean hard on the arm everlasting, availing the Father, both you and your Lord will bear. His love has no limits, his grace has no measure, his power has no boundary, nor none to men. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again. So not long after that, we got good news. We went to see the doctors and they said Lydia was doing much better since her procedure and that we would be able to go home soon. Now, we didn't expect that. We thought we could still be there for a long time. So that was really exciting and that was really good news. But then they put the oxygen monitor on Lydia, and the oxygen monitor would show how well she was doing. And so we often got a bit nervous when they would stick this on. But they put it on and her oxygen levels were too low. So they said, oh no, maybe you won't be able to go home. We're going to have to make another plan now because her oxygen levels are too low. And so we'd had good news and then suddenly we had bad news. Well, it seemed like bad news at the time. And we had to wait in the little hospital room while the doctors talked about what to do now that her oxygen levels were low. And I remember just feeling so disappointed. And, you know, it's just hard. It's just like ups and downs when you're in the hospital and you don't know what's happening next. And good news and bad news and good news and bad news. And so I was feeling rather down and my husband pulled out his phone and he had found a song on YouTube. And he wanted me to see it. So he started playing it and I listened to it. And it was an old song which I had known for years. But I never really noticed the words of the 3 middle verses. And it was like they were written just for me right then. And they're all based on verses in the Bible. And they were so encouraging and helpful to me. I'm going to sing them to you now. And it's from the old hymn, How Firm Our Foundation. Fear not, I am with you. Oh, be not dismayed, for I am your God, and will still give thee aid. I'll strengthen you, help you, and cause you to stand, upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand. When through the deep waters I call you to go, the rivers of sorrow cannot overflow, for I will be with you, your trouble to bless and sanctify to you your deepest distress. When through fiery trials your pathway shall lie, my grace, all sufficient, shall be your supply. The flame shall not hurt you, I only design your dross to consume and your gold to refine. So that was a song that helped me right then. But, you know, we did get to go home. We checked again the next day, Lydia's oxygen levels. I think we actually had her on the monitor overnight and her levels were good. So we were able to go home, but that wasn't the end of our problems. So this time we were going to go on a normal flight with Air New Zealand, and we went with a nurse. So she was there to help take care of Lydia because we actually had to go back. I think we went back to the Wellington Hospital first. So we went back to the airport and we get on the plane, we're getting all settled, and the nurse thought she would be safe and just check where the oxygen was just in case we needed it. So she went to talk to the pilot, and when the pilot heard that there was a baby on board with health problems who might need oxygen, he got all worried. And so he tried to check if Lydia was actually allowed to fly, if it was safe for her to fly. But he was looking up the wrong person. He was not looking up Lydia's details. And the nurse comes back to us where we were sitting with Lydia and said, we are getting kicked off the plane because they don't think it's safe for her to fly. Now, this was really embarrassing because while the pilot was trying to figure this out, it delayed the plane. And so it had come over the loudspeaker on the plane that, sorry about the delay, but we're trying to sort through some illegal paperwork. And then we've got to get up and walk off the plane. And that was very humiliating because it looked like we were trying to do something illegal. So we had to go back into the airport and we got put in a little room. And then we found out that the pilot realized that he'd been looking up the wrong records and that Lydia should have been able to fly. And then he felt really bad and really stressed because he'd, gotten us off the plane. So he gave us some free hot drinks. But anyway, we finally did make it home. And when Lydia was 6 months old, she had to go back to Starship for heart surgery, which was a really big thing, but she recovered well. We went back home again after 2 weeks. And within a week, she was sick again. And so we went into Masterton Hospital and we thought it was just something like bronchiolitis. But then a few days later, they did a scan on her chest and they realized that one of her lungs had shut down because she had fluid leaking in her chest from the heart surgery. It was like a complication because just before her heart surgery, the doctors found a third problem with her heart and there was a complication from that problem. So Lydia had to go on the rescue helicopter to Wellington. So the rescue helicopter gets you there really fast. And there's a verse in the Bible that says, call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee and thou shalt glorify me. So God is also like a rescue helicopter. And, well, not only when we have problems, but when we have problems, we need to remember that God is like a rescue helicopter and we need to call and pray to him because he does promise to help us. He might not take the problem away, but he will help us. So we had to go back we went to Wellington first and they put a drain in her chest and so that started to clear out the fluid. But then they thought, well, you better just go back up to Starship and, the heart surgeons and the specialists up there can check her out. So we had to go back up there. And that was a bit hard because we'd finally got back home again and now we were back up there. And she was up there for a very long time because it took a long time for her chest to heal. And she had drains put in and then they would get blocked up and they'd have to take them out and put new ones in. And one time she even pulled the drain out herself. But one time they had having to change the dressing on her drain. And so she was there in a cot with 2 nurses trying to change this dressing. And it was very painful for Lydia. And I came in and I stood next to her and I was watching her. And she was looking up at me crying. And I felt so bad just sitting there and I wasn't doing anything to help her. And yet it was because I loved her that I was letting the nurses hurt her because she needed to have that dressing changed. And to me, it was a real picture of me and God. Like I was praying to God saying, why is this happening? This is hard. This hurts. Why are we back in hospital again? Why is Lydia sick again? And yet God would have been thinking similar things as to what I was thinking about Lydia. God knows what we need. And God doesn't stop anything bad from happening to us because he knows what we need. So just like Lydia had to trust me, I was there with her and I did really care about her. And I did love her and I was there for her. But I couldn't stop the hard things from happening to her because she needed it. because it was for her own good. And so I learned to trust God, just like Lydia had to trust me. I had to trust God that these things were happening for a good purpose and that He was there too. He does care. And He was there with me, just like I was there with Lydia. So God does care about us when we go through hard times, but because He does love us, He does let hard things happen sometimes because they can be very good for us. And you know what? Just like I care about Lydia, mothers naturally care for their children. God cares for us too. And if we've confessed our sins to God and we believe in Jesus, then we are God's own child. And God promises that just like a mother comforts her child, God will comfort us. So when we're sorry for our sin and believe in Jesus, we become God's own child, and He promises to take care of us like a father, like a good father, and also like a mother. He is compassionate and He cares for us. And the Bible says He is the God of all comfort. And that's one of the biggest things I learned during that whole year, because we were in hospital so much of the time. I learned that God is the God of all comfort. He comforts like a mother comforts her child, and He always has more grace and more help for when things feel like they are too hard. So I hope and pray that you may trust in Him, just like Lydia had to trust me, that I did love and care about her. Pray that you may learn to trust in God just like that. Oh, and I said that there was a baby who was born who was good news. So Mary in the New Testament, she got news that she was going to have a baby, and it was also a miracle because she wasn't married yet and she wasn't with a man yet. She was just engaged, but she wasn't living with him or anything like that. She got news that she was going to have a baby, and that was impossible. But she believed what the angel said, and her baby, the angel said, was going to be the Savior. His name was going to be Jesus, and He was going to be the Savior of the world.